What happened in Wuhan and later in Italy were human catastrophes. But the countries have provided invaluable evidence of what to do and what not to do. Assisting people to breathe deemed a crucial lesson.
The bit of the system which will come under pressure first will be those conditions that require people to have oxygen and particularly to have critical care beds.
That means getting ventilators. The UK simply didn't have anywhere near enough. A month ago, we had 5,900 ventilators. The government told Newsnight last week that in a worst-case scenario, they would need up to 25,000. Hence, a massive drive to increase capacity. Last week, the government announced it had increased its ventilator capacity to 8,000. That not being enough, the Health Secretary put out an extraordinary call to manufacturers.
We've got high-quality engineering in this country, and we want anybody who has the manufacturing capability to turn to manufacture of ventilators.
Airbus, Dyson, McLaren were just a few of the hundreds of companies that said that they could help. Time was of the essence, with a predicted peak of cases in the next few weeks. On Monday, when quizzed on the Today programme, the plan seemed to be going unexpectedly well.
Have any new ones been made?
Yes, we've made a serious progress on that. There's now over 12,000 that we've managed to get to.
It was a line that was written up across the UK and further afield. But there's been some confusion. The government, in a briefing yesterday, said that there were 8,000 ventilators. We approached the Department of Health for clarity, and tonight they've told us that that is correct. The figure is 8,000 ventilators. It begs the question, when will these new ventilators be ready?
We know that there is a huge effort going on to increase the number of ventilators. It would be really helpful for everybody on the front line to know exactly how quickly that is going to happen.
You have been asking various...
That brings us on to another claim made by Matthew Hancock last week. This on BBC Breakfast last Friday.
It's unbelievable. In a matter of days, some of these top engineering companies have already turned their hand to this effort and already got their prototypes out.
Certainly encouraging to hear something like that. But when will they then, once the prototype, when will you approve the prototype? How quickly can you do that? And how quickly can these ventilators be in the hospitals?
In a matter of days.
You might think that in a matter of days means a few days, but that doesn't appear to have happened either. Newsnight hasn't found any examples of these companies producing ventilators at any scale right now. For example, we approached perhaps the biggest consortium of companies, Ventilator Challenge UK, which has companies like McLaren, Ford and Airbus attempting to make ventilators at scale. But they told us that their target of making the first ventilator was the 30th of March, though that was looking tough. And that's only when it comes off the production line. It won't be NHS ready. Professor Andrew Farmery is an expert in ventilators and has even made a simple ventilator that he thinks could help, and he's worried.
Well, Matthew Hancock has announced that we're very close to having the solution. That sounds comforting. If it's true, that's great. But we see no evidence that that is the case. And I can't really see how it could be the case, because I know the capacity of existing ventilator manufacturers to produce, and I know how impossible it would be for anybody to uptool another industry, Jaguar Land Rover, Dyson, JCB, Rolls-Royce. That's not going to happen.
Tonight, an announcement from Dyson that they've been commissioned to make 10,000 new ventilators. Production will start in early April, but that won't fix the shortage now.
The good news is that the NHS has procured extra ventilators, but by definition, some of those will take some time to come through. So the reality is the capacity that we've probably got now is the capacity we're going to have over the next couple of weeks.
And it's that next couple of weeks which could see a huge increase in hospital demand that will really test whether the UK has enough hospital equipment to cope.
James Clayton then, the Department of Health, said tonight that it had significantly increased its ventilator capacity and that thousands more were expected to be available in the coming weeks. It added that more than 3,000 businesses had responded to the government's call for action, so the number of orders it placed would continue to increase. We'll discuss this all in a few moments with Nadeem Zahawi, the business manager who also oversees procurement of ventilators. First, though, joining us is Andrew Rayner, the managing director of MEC Medical, a medical parts company, and Dr. Claudia Paoloni, a consultant anaesthetist and president of the HSCA, the Hospital Doctors Union. Andrew, if I can just start with you. You make the parts for ventilators without which they can't run. Now, I understand you got in touch with the government as soon as they put out the call for help a few weeks ago. What happened then?
Nothing, quite honestly. Obviously, the department of, so the DTI got in contact, said, we know you can make ventilator parts, can supply ventilators. Can you fill in the government website information, which I did, and just didn't hear anything. It's only been recently, since the consortiums have started to gear up to manufacture prototypes, that they've obviously got in contact with me now directly to, start to turn parts or make the accessories, prototype accessories that they're going to need for these ventilators. But I can tell you now, they're not days away, they're going to be weeks away. And the volume that our government require and the manufacturing that's going to have to go into these, there's no quick solution at all. The turning time for my parts alone is weeks, and it's just not, I can't see it being feasible. They should be putting their efforts into existing manufacturers of ventilators and trying to upscale their production.
So what are you doing now? I mean, if you feel that valuable time has been lost, what are you actually doing now? Because you just had the Excel contract, right?
Yeah, so I'm supplying a lot of equipment to the medical gas installation companies that are going to, lay all the pipe work and flexible hoses to outlet points, the actual outlet points themselves in the Excel. So we're working with the install maintenance companies at the moment to deliver that side of the project. So, and that, again, we're at full capacity as we are, but we're obviously prioritising that for the two companies that have been awarded that, and hopefully they'll get parts for that next week. But I supply to some major ventilator manufacturers who obviously must have NHS contracts, etc. And we've got thousands and thousands of accessory parts to make. I mean, my order book's gone tenfold increase in 2 weeks. And I obviously supply a lot of accessories to hospitals directly. They want to split oxygen outlets from 1 to 2. We literally can't make these quick enough. And there's only about 3 of our...
Are you getting help? Are you getting help now with your workers to make them quicker, to bring more people in?
Well, I brought more people in off our own back, and I've turned literally every penny that we have available in cash to more parts. But in terms of actual government help or contact, absolutely nothing. They've gone and ploughed loads of money into big consortiums to try and, make a cheap makeshift ventilator, which is fair enough. But really, they should have gone and given funding to existing ventilator manufacturers and existing companies like us who could just upscale quicker.
I guess the government could turn around and say, look, there are other companies. Dyson, we're hearing tonight, has received an order for 10,000 ventilators. Presumably they can turn those around more quickly.
Well, maybe. But again, you've got a lot of, I don't know how bulletproof their supply chain is, but we're already seeing from our supply chain, we use a lot of subcontractors to finish parts, etc. We can't do everything in-house. And they've all shut down now. They're saying it's easier for us to shut down because the government have said, we're going to subsidise 80% of salaries up to £2,500. So they've just taken the view, it's easier just to shut than support, medical device manufacturers. So
they're not key workers then? They're not considered essential key workers?
Well, not by our government, but of course they are. And we're trying to convince them to stay open. I've got one of my, subcontractors who's absolutely crucial to us. They've got 10 to 20 CNCs running parts for me now. They run 24/7, and the managing director of that company, he's just gone and purchased another CNC machine off his own back to cater for my parts. That investment was hundreds of thousands of pounds for that CNC machine, state-of-the-art sliding head. Yeah. I'm sure Dyson have got lots of them sitting in, various facilities they have. But we've already got parts drawn that I supply to other ventilator manufacturers. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Andrew Rayner, really appreciate you filling us in on that one. Let me talk to Claudia Paoloni. The government's used this phrase for days now, Dr Paoloni, that they're ramping up testing of your members, of NHS staff, of frontline people. Are you getting what you need in terms of testing now?
I think testing is quite a difficult situation, and I would say that no, there are still delays in getting the tests and prioritising who is receiving the tests. But the testing in itself isn't just the solution, because there's this test that is currently available, which is a test specifically to see if you are positive right now with the virus, actually doesn't help workers who are self-isolating at home, who need to know whether they are actually immune or not. And that test is quite a long time away from coming. It can tell them whether they're positive, but the negative is more difficult to interpret.
Let me ask you about protective equipment. That's another thing that we've heard a lot about. We had somebody on our programme earlier saying that staff were using bin bags, Wicks goggles, school science classroom goggles, because they didn't have enough protective clothing. Are you experiencing those shortages?
We're getting messages of medics that are having to improvise. There is PPE insufficiency across the country at the moment, and I'm very pleased that the government is making strong efforts to support that. But what we are concerned about is actually that the current level of personal protection equipment that is available and the guidance that goes with that actually needs reinforcing, it needs reviewing, because the evidence now is suggesting that there are many members of the public and workers who may well be asymptomatic and shedding virus into the environment. And that needs addressing with further protection equipment to be made available for more instances. And separate subspecialties are now actually rewriting the guidance to substantiate that. And this needs an urgent review.
OK, Dr Paoloni, thank you both. Thank you very much indeed. A lot to put to our Minister then, Nadeem Zahawi. Nice of you to come in, Nadeem. Let's start, first of all, with the figures, if we can, because I think they've caused a lot of confusion. They look very positive, the fall in the number of deaths overnight. Can we interpret that in any kind of pattern?
Well, at this stage, I wouldn't interpret anything into the figures. I think the Prime Minister's right to say that the message is very clear. Stay at home, make sure we protect the NHS and save lives. Because
so
we need
we're not dropping. The curve is not yet dropping.
Bear down on that curve, as the Prime Minister rightly says. We have to keep going. That's the message. We have to continue on this task. And it's important that people remember that if you don't need to go out to work, then please stay at home. There are a number of businesses we've asked to shut down, like non-essential retail, clubs, pubs, and so on. If your employer can allow you to work from home, then you should be working from home, and that employer should allow you to work from home.
I don't want to get into that too much, because as you've seen, there's a lot of work that we are trying to understand in terms of the ventilator numbers, which could be critical. We hope they won't be, but they could be critical some weeks down the line. Now, we don't even understand how many there are, because the ministers, Matt Hancock and Robert Jenrick, were saying, even tonight, 12,000. We understand from the Department of Health there's only 8,000. And we also know that you need between 25 and 30,000. And we've heard now from expert after expert and manufacturer saying there is no way, even if you started making those now, you're going to reach the capacity you need within months. It's not going to happen in days, and it's not going to happen in that 2 to 3 week peak.
Well, I've been involved in this project as the Business and Industry Minister. I was on the call with the Prime Minister when he spoke to 60 manufacturers to say we need this additional ventilator capacity. And I have to say, the 9th largest manufacturing country in the world manufacturers really stepped up to do this. Now, what we were just hearing is actually sort of a little bit of the story, but let me just try and clear it up for you. You'll respond
entirely to what Andrew Rayner said and others. Yeah.
Absolutely. So there are two things. There are those like Dyson who wanted to design one afresh and make one, which they've done, which is phenomenal.
Right. So let's wait a second. Let's stick with that, because they've said tonight they're going to make 10,000 ventilators. Yeah. When can we expect those to be up and running?
So they're going to make 15,000. In fact, 10,000. They've had an order for 5,000 that they're going to give away, 1,000 for the UK, plus others are also. So the one I've been working with.
Sorry, when can we expect those ventilators to be up and running?
So the Dyson ones, they've said that they'll have them in April. That's when they'll have the first production through.
At the beginning of April, they will be ready to be used in critical care.
Well, not just Dyson. What I'm saying to you is we're procuring others. So
no, but I'm just asking about this, because you've got 10,000. That's a huge number.
Yes.
It's very reassuring for a population to hear that. Will the Dyson ventilators be usable, for example, in the Excel Centre at the beginning of April?
So all ventilators that the different consortia are working on will be usable, because we're working hand in glove with the regulator to make sure they're ready. So one of the other ways
you're not answering the question. You're not giving me any time frame. I'm just trying to understand.
As soon as they can be made, they will be in the NHS. That's the whole thing, because we're trying to do.
But we've heard from Chris Whitty that the peak could come in between 2 and 3 weeks' time. So why on earth are you trying to commission ventilators that won't be there for the peak now?
So if you'll allow me to just... We sort of got stuck just on the Dyson announcement. The one that I've been working with is 2 consortia led by Dick Elsey, who's a brilliant engineer, head of the high-value manufacturing Catapult in the UK. He effectively looked at 2 existing designs, one already being manufactured by a small company in the UK, and we're ramping up. That's what they want to do, is ramp up their production.
What does ramp up mean?
So you bring in other manufacturers, like the automotive sector, like the aerospace sector, and help.
Will any of those new ventilators be ready in 2 weeks' time?
That's exactly what we're working to. That is exactly what we're working to.
I'm asking because the numbers are really confused.
Yes.
You know, Matt Hancock's been saying that there are 12,000. There aren't. Robert Jenrick said tonight there are 12,000. There aren't. The Department of Health is telling us there are only 8,000. So how do we know what to make of the numbers that the government's throwing out?
So I tell you where the confusion is. One, the message you need to know is we need thousands more, which is why we put out this call 10 days ago by the Prime Minister to say, look, let's get going. This is a national effort. We've all worked together on this, right? The 8,000 are already in the NHS, but the NHS is also constantly procuring, which is why when you say 12,000, because that's already procured in the system, but maybe not yet actually in place. So what we're doing, what I'm trying to do is work with the consortia.
Constantly procuring from who, though? I'm just trying to work out, have we got 8 or have we got 12?
So you've got existing suppliers that are already producing, but they have capacity constraints. What you need then is to ramp up that capacity. That's what I'm trying to explain to you.
I understand. I'm just trying to get numbers and dates.
I am trying my best to try and explain to you. So what the consortia are doing are working with existing machines, existing supplies, to see whether we can ramp it up rapidly, producing 10,000 a week. That is the target.
There's been a lot
so we can get there as quickly as possible with this national effort.
There's been a lot of talk of ramping up. We've heard about ramping up. The government's talked about ramping up testing. Boris Johnson told us 8 days ago it would be ramping up testing to 25,000.
Yes.
Now, it is inconceivable that your frontline staff, the people protecting us and putting their lives at risk, are not getting tested for the virus. How can that still be happening?
So we've tested today 6,400 tests, and we are ramping up to 25,000 tests a day. 3.5 million.
Just concede that hasn't happened since the government, since the Prime Minister said it would happen 9 days ago.
We were at 5,000 tests a day. Today was 6,400 tests. What we are doing is we have 3.5 million of the antibody tests, which are a real game changer.
I don't want to talk about those. I want to talk about the NHS staff.
Well, they are the critical people. These are the frontline staff.
Right.
Of course, we're going to make sure that they are tested, so that we make sure that, one, they are
Be honest,
able
you're not
to
going
do
to
their
get
job.
up to 25,000 tests a day, are you?
Of course we are. This is a national effort. Look at what happened today. 500,000 people, as of tonight, have volunteered to come and help the NHS
can't
to
offer
deliver.
you tests.
No, but what I'm saying to you is we've got 3.5 million of the antibody tests coming in.
You're changing the subject.
No,
I'm
not
sorry.
changing the subject, Emily.
You are,
Chris
because we're
Whitty
talking
today,
about NHS staff who might be isolating instead of being able to be on the front line because the government can't provide these tests. Now, if the government said we can't provide the tests, it would be one thing. The government hasn't said that. It said 9 days ago, we'll do 25,000 a day. And you've just told me you've got from 5 to 6 in the space of a week.
Right, so we've got 6,400 tests today. Chris Whitty today explained that actually what we need to do is make sure we get these antibody tests in. We have to test them. He and the chief scientist said we have to test them to see whether they work so they don't give a false reading. That's also important.
That's a different test.
And then we're going to roll
That's
that out.
test.
Well, that's the game-changing test.
Well, it isn't for the NHS staff who are also, as you heard, using bin bags as aprons, using classroom goggles from their kids' schools. They are setting up charities to get the public to help because they haven't got protective uniform. Aren't you ashamed of that?
Well, first of all, we are absolutely making sure that we buy the equipment and the equipment is there. We have a COBRA that is dedicated to procurement, chaired by Michael Gove. That is all we've been doing, is looking at procurement. So this, of course, we don't want to see any shortages anywhere in the system, but we are absolutely focused on delivering this.
This isn't the first day they've been saying this. They've been telling you this for weeks. Now, you must have looked, as a government minister, at Wuhan. You must have looked at the Chinese building hospitals in 6 days. You must have looked at the kind of protective clothing that was being used there. How could that not compute into something that you had to be readying here in this country months ago?
And we have. This is the whole point. You speak as if we've done nothing. We have been planning and planning and planning. We have a COBRA dedicated to procurement. I just explained that. We have Simon Stevens, who's been planning and planning and planning so the NHS can deal with it. Today, you heard from Chris Whitty, the chief medical officer, saying that the NHS can actually...
He said we need more testing.
But we'll be able to cope with this. And we've heard from Imperial College, as you've just heard Nick Watt report, that they're saying we just might be able to cope with it, but it requires a national
on that
effort.
question,
of coping, all of us to pull
very
together,
briefly,
rather than snipe it.
No, it's not sniping. This is our job, to ask you, the government, to explain to people on the front line why they're not getting the stuff they need. The Excel Centre is going ahead, becoming a hospital. We've seen that extraordinary turnaround now. I think the Times is reporting that there will also be a field hospital in Manchester and in Birmingham as well, at the Exhibition Centre. Is that right? Are those two being turned into hospitals?
Well, I haven't seen those reports yet. Of course, I am in the Business and Industry Department. Matt Hancock will make those announcements, or the Prime Minister at the appropriate time. But the Excel Centre, as you know, is going ahead, 4,000 beds there. And if we all pull together, we can make sure that the NHS can cope, is protected and will save lives if we all stay at home. That's the big message.
Nadeem Zahawi, thank you very much, and thanks for coming in.